Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and once again a pretty detailed forecast update coming your way. We're going to be talking about a cold front that's just blown through Western Australia and is now on the way to impact South Australia, Victoria and Tasmania. We've also got a very strong low pressure system that's expected to bring widespread Antarctic conditions to the eastern states, so a lot on that coming up later on this video. We've also got to talk about a strong cold front that's also expected to impact Western Australia, and we'll also touch on the tropics as well, just briefly, all of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast. If you are brand new to the channel, then please consider subscribing and also leave a like on the video while you're at it. Your support is greatly appreciated. So we're just going to briefly start things off over west. We have that strong cold front blow through the Perth metro area, and just like predicted, the rainfall was quite hit and miss. However, Perth's still picking up a decent 25 millimetres. Mount Nazareth outside of Armidale picked up a very healthy 75 millimetres overnight, and my gauge at home picked up 60 millimetres, so a very good amount of rainfall has fallen so far for a lot of areas. However, there's also been places, especially in the northern suburbs, that have missed out on decent drops, but that doesn't really matter now. The cold front is in the past. Just a few showers expected to continue blowing through today. You can see it's well on its way through the Great Australian Bight and on towards South Australia, which is the next point of interest here. And if you were to take a look at the rainfall forecast here, if we draw this back to today actually, you can see it already starting to blow through the Great Australian Bight with a couple of storms and showers here and there. Throughout the course of today, it's expected to blow up some pretty good thunderstorm activity, and it could be developing some very heavy rainfall in it. However, this heavy rainfall isn't expected to be a problem for South Australia. In fact, the light to moderate falls really only extending between Ceduna and Port Lincoln on the Eyre Peninsula throughout the course of really late this evening and into early tomorrow morning, and then those light showers start to pick up at around 5 or 6 a.m. for Adelaide itself, and a little bit earlier for communities further towards the coastline. From Adelaide, and the heavy falls also possible around Kangaroo Island very early tomorrow morning, but it really doesn't look like heavy rainfall is going to be a problem. There will be some light to moderate falls extending up into South Australia, probably as far north as Cooper Pedy or Oodnadatta for some locations, but like I said, they'll be very light, only a couple of drops expected here and there, and it won't amount to more than 1 or 2 millimetres, and it is just more rainfall out there. It's going to be more miserable weather this time of the year. They're expecting to be bathed in nice sunshine, especially further up north into South Australia, so just some more miserable weather coming through there, and it does look like this cold front is going to be bringing some pretty miserable weather to the south of South Australia as well. It'll be a little bit of reprieve to the very cool conditions that they've been experiencing. However, still around Robe, it's only going to be a drizzly day. There's no real heavy rainfall coming through. By around lunchtime, this cold front will enter the western parts of Victoria, but it's really not expected to impact Victoria significantly in terms of rainfall. There'll be a couple of drops here and there, especially on the western side of the state. We could be seeing 10 to 15 millimetres around lunchtime Thursday, but the rainfall won't penetrate too far into Victoria, and by the time it gets to Melbourne, it'll just be a couple of drops here and there by Thursday evening, tomorrow evening. Tasmania also expecting a couple of heavy drops here and there. There will also be some strong winds associated with the crossing of this cold front, especially out of the north or the north-northeast for some locations, especially on the northern side of the island around Burnie, Stanley or Penguin. We could be seeing some gusty northeasterly conditions there, and I wouldn't be surprised if a severe weather warning was issued today. However, they just don't look strong enough to really warrant a severe weather warning, not at least by Tasmania's standings. They can cop an absolute beating, and still the weather authorities don't really take much notice of them. Some heavy rainfall still possible, up to 20 millimetres of the stuff I expect to fall Thursday evening and into early Friday morning. There'll also be a couple of drops on a secondary cold front that's going to brush up and sweep across through the state sometime to Friday afternoon, just before your weekend gets underway. But it does look like it's going to be a relatively calm weekend in terms of weather, as a weak high pressure system gets itself over Tasmania and Victoria, and that means, of course, a return to the cool conditions on Saturday. There'll be many places dipping below zero Saturday night, and a little bit of snow also possible on the mountains adjacent to the west coast. Victoria expecting a couple of drops also throughout the course of Friday, but again, nothing serious. And if you were to take a look at rainfall accumulation over the next 3 days, which covers all of this cold front activity, the wettest places will only pick up about 20 millimetres or so, and those are expected to be concentrated in South Australia. Adelaide itself will be one of those wettest places, up to 20 millimetres expected there. The Eyre Peninsula, especially on the west coast, up towards 10 or 15 millimetres, but it's going to be pretty hit and miss the further east you get. And once you get further north towards Ceduna or even towards Roxby Downs, the rainfall gets very unpredictable up there. Just a couple of very hit and miss millimetres expected. A few drops expected to continue into New South Wales as well. A bit of a gloomy day Thursday and Friday into the western parts of New South Wales around Broken Hill, and a few showers here and there expected through Victoria. And like I said, the bulk of the rainfall happening around Tasmania, 30 to 35 millimetres on the northern coast. There will be places probably around Sheffield or Sassafras that pick up to 50 millimetres of of rain from this weather event. However, I wouldn't be surprised if this weather event also completely busts out entirely. That's a lot of talk for a weak cold front. However, it is happening pretty soon, so I thought that it'd be worth the mention. You can see this big streak of rainfall starting to stream down on the 3-day forecast period, and that leads us very nicely into the next part of our video. There's a low pressure system that's expected to develop sometime Thursday afternoon into Friday morning offshore from Brisbane and Byron Bay. Now, this is very important. This plays a huge part in next week's weather, so you've got to pay attention to this, especially if you live in New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania, even into Queensland as well. This will surprise you. Take a look at this weather event. It intensifies as it heads through Lord Howe Island. Some very heavy rain is expected on Lord Howe Island through Friday evening. So for those watching there, first of all, hello. Second of all, some severe weather and damaging winds, heavy rainfall very much possible throughout the course of Friday. Big waves as well. Now, this low pressure system gets itself into the Tasman Sea, and it kind of hooks around back towards Tasmania as a very deep low pressure system here. This is very strong, 983 millibars just offshore from Tasmania here, and you can see it swings itself up onto Tasmania as very much an Arctic subtropical low. It's very strong here. It's got some damaging winds, and this is when now we're looking at around Monday. And once again, congruent between the forecast models as well. The GFS loving this weather system. However, it's got it so much stronger going straight over the top of Hobart. I believe that's it's 990 millibars. I read that as 970 millibars. The Axis G3 as well, calling for this to be very strong in the Tasman Sea. You can see the forecast models are absolutely loving this weather event. Now, this means severe weather left, right, and centre for the south and the east coast of Tasmania. Damaging wind gusts in excess of 110 kilometres an hour are possible. Around the core of the system, they're going to be as high as 125 kilometres an hour. That's destructive, and some heavy snow also expected in the mountainous regions of Tasmania. Now, as this weather system moves further north, it's going to be dragging an icy pool of weather throughout the western side of it, and that is going to stream right through Tasmania. And considering it's going to be on the east coast of Australia, it's going to stream up through Victoria into New South Wales and will make it as far north as Queensland. Now, this doesn't mean that there's going to be too much rainfall, but the rainfall that does fall is going to be freezing. The conditions are going to be dropping well below zero for some locations and very close to zero for a lot of other locations. I mean, this is Friday evening, and you're already seeing temperatures plummet very close to zero around Orange and up towards Tamworth here in the mountainous regions around New South Wales. Now, this map doesn't really do it justice, but you can already start to see some snow and freezing rain falling on the Australian Alps, and that just intensifies throughout the course of Tuesday. Early Tuesday morning, we're looking at snow falling as far north as the Barrington Tops outside of Newcastle. Some of the mountains outside of Tamworth, it's going to be a very rare snowfall event up there, and even as far north as Grafton, the mountains outside of there. Watch very closely because that becomes on the forecast as well. And just considering the temperatures around here, I'm really going to zoom into New South Wales and hammer this home. Between Bathurst and Orange and up towards Tamworth, you can see on this plane just adjacent to the Great Dividing Range. I know this isn't really a mountainous area once you get out of the Great Dividing Range. You're still looking at temperatures as low as 2 or 3 degrees Celsius, and for some locations even lower than that. Snow typically can fall below 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. Even though it is frozen, it doesn't necessarily have to be freezing for it to fall. However, it does need to be below freezing for it to properly settle. And these towns here are actually at a slim chance of receiving some snow throughout the course of Tuesday, especially Bathurst and communities adjacent to it. We're going to have to be watching out very closely. That's rainfall accumulation, but we want to keep it on the rainfall forecast here. Tuesday evening, there's also a really good chance of snow. It's going to be quite heavy along the Kosciuszko, Thredbo sort of area with freezing rain also there, so road conditions all through the Great Dividing Range Tuesday evening, especially for elevations above, I believe, 800 metres it's going to be. That's probably going to be the magic number for a weather event like this, are going to be very hazardous indeed. And you can see on the temperature forecast here, this Tuesday evening, this isn't even the morning, we're looking at widespread conditions plummeting towards zero or even slightly below zero, -2 up towards the mountains outside of Coffs Harbour, so freezing cold, that's for sure. And if we pull this temperature forecast up towards 800 metres in elevation, you can see not only do we have some pretty strong winds for these areas, so wind chill is going to be absolutely awful in some of these mountainous locations, but the conditions are perfect for some snowfall. So Just a heads up, it does look like there's going to be some freezing rain and some snowfall for locations on the inward side of the Great Dividing Range, closer to the pastoral regions of New South Wales, anywhere between what looks to be Wagga Wagga up towards Orange, Bathurst, Tamworth. It looks like there's some good chance of some snow for the mountains outside of them, so just a heads up on that forecast there. It is going to be absolutely awfully cold throughout the course of Monday into Tuesday and then Wednesday next week. Now, these conditions should slowly ease off throughout the course of Wednesday, but it still looks like that snow hangs around throughout Thursday, and it's going to take it until about Thursday or Friday for this weather system to get itself further out in the Tasman Sea and weaken off substantially, and all the while it's going to be dragging awfully cold conditions up in its wake. And unfortunately, it looks like a high pressure system is going to get itself stuck into Queensland and the northern parts of New South Wales. And if we know anything about high pressure systems over the past week, we know that they bring absolutely ruthlessly cold conditions, and that's exactly what's on the forecast, back below -4, -5 for a lot of locations in the Australian Alps. We're also looking at widespread temperatures below 2 or 1 degree Celsius for lots of New South Wales and Queensland as well. So just a heads up, it looks like next week is going to be awfully cold. I will summarise that before we get to the full snow forecast. Monday, those conditions are going to start to become very almost subarctic, to be honest. And then throughout the course of Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, the chances of snow on elevations above 800 metres, but more likely towards 1100, and as you get further north, about 1300 metres are possible throughout the course of Tuesday and Wednesday, that is, and it's going to be for those locations all throughout the Great Dividing Range up towards the Queensland, New South Wales border. It shouldn't make itself into Queensland, and this sort of weather event happens about once every year, once or twice every year. This is certainly going to be a very strong example of a weather event like this, but it is not overly unusual that we do see some snow on these mountains here. They are certainly high enough for it, and if we take a look at the 10-day snow forecast here, you can actually see there's some very good accumulations expected. Now, don't always take the Eastern West snow forecast at face value. Often it can get things wrong, especially for some locations, but more or less it is pretty accurate, I find. 10 centimetres to 12 or 13 centimetres here, especially for Barrington Tops outside of Newcastle here, 15 centimetres, that's a lot of snowfall for that location, and there is the chance for some record-breaking snowfalls here and some settling snowfalls too. For the hills outside of Tamworth itself actually expecting a possible flurry, considering its elevation and its location within a couple of hills. There is the chance of a flurry or two there. Armidale also expecting a couple of snowflakes too. Orange has been a bit of a wild card on the forecast here. It's actually been saying for a couple of days that there is some chances of some snow around Orange. I think it's going to be concentrated around the hills there, and if there is going to be a place that gets snow, it will be Bathurst. There's also some snow expected on those hills outside of Sydney. Of course, Thredbo and the Australian Alps getting the bulk of the snow, and then down towards Mount Buller and Mount Hotham also expecting up to 20 centimetres of snow there, so some very good accumulations. However, I would say that these little snow flurries out here on the hills around Dubbo and then up towards Moree, I think that that's a little bit of a model discrepancy here. You can see between the other forecast models, the GFS, which I don't normally use for snow forecasts, and the Axis G3 not really calling for that kind of random snow falling outside of the mountainous regions here. But still, just a heads up, this is a very interesting weather event and certainly something we're going to have to be watching very closely, and it's going to cause some pretty severe cold throughout this part of New South Wales. You're probably wondering, what is the talk on the rainfall here? Well, over the next 10 days, actually not that much. There will be some spots that pick up towards 20, maybe 25 millimetres, but in terms of rainfall, really not much is expected. Sydney expected to be high and dry basically for the next 10 days, and the rainfall also not extending that far into Queensland. But yeah, if you've got any questions on this weather event, please do leave it in the comment section down below. This is a very interesting weather event, and I'd be more than happy to talk about it further one-on-one in the comment section down below. I'll be giving detailed weather updates on this until it actually happens. And I'm just going to move up north and quickly talk about far north Queensland, because that heavy rainfall that was on the forecast yesterday, that has more or less completely been dropped, and I did sort of expect it to be dropped. It was very unseasonable for this time of the year. You can see that there is still a couple of drops expected around sort of Airlie Beach and Bowen in around 7 or 8 days' time, I do believe, but I don't think it's going to be a bit of a concern, and I think it's going to get dropped from the forecast as well. So just a heads up that the rainfall up there has been dropped, and it's going to be a return to the sunny conditions for all of those outside of the immediate and very wet rainfall conditions. Now, that is a lot of talk on the east coast. We're going to head things over west now and talk about a very strong cold front that's expected to impact the Perth metro area. Now, I shouldn't really be using the word expected because it is a little bit of a wild card in the forecast this time. And before I get onto it, I would actually like to talk about the system that blew through last night. It was quite strong, it was. It had some very strong winds and some locally heavy falls as well. Like I said, my gauge picked up 60 millimetres overnight. That's some very good rainfall, especially from weather system like this. And exactly how I said, the rainfall was going to be unpredictable. The northern suburbs really only got a couple of good drops, 10 millimetres or so up towards Joondalup, and not too much in the way of good rainfall there. Bickley itself picked up 45 millimetres, and like I said at the start of the video, Mount Nazarone outside of Armidale picked up a whopping 70 millimetres, bang on the forecast there. So that was very good to see, and you can already start to see the rain starting to stream into the goldfields at this time. And we used the weather radar here to just take a look at what has actually blown through. Well, it does look like there is a little bit more rainfall on the cards of the Perth metro area. There's also some good rainfall expected into the goldfields and even parts of the wheat belt throughout the course of today. If you do live in the goldfields or the wheat belt, please let me know how much rainfall you have received, because like I said, it was going to be an interesting cold front in terms of how much rainfall, especially the wheat belt got. I wasn't really hopeful, but it does look like a few spots, especially in the central parts and the north, actually picked up a few good accumulations. That is some great news to see. There's a lot of talk on a weather event that's already happened, so we're going to bring the forecast back to the late parts of next week and just take a look at what the eastern breath is throwing towards the West Australian coastline. Now, this is late Wednesday, the 17th of July, coinciding exactly when this cold front over east is really at its peak, and you can see a strong cold front here with some isolated pockets of heavy rainfall, but a big band of moderate rainfall and a few gusts of damaging winds by the looks of it blows through the Perth metro area and the southwest Capes, and it looks like this weather event could be bringing up to 25 millimetres. Now, I absolutely wouldn't be talking about a weather event like this if it wasn't of concern, because the other forecast models have got some pretty interesting things to say about it. The Axis G3 is bang on board with what the Eastern Weather forecast has to say. However, it's got a very heavy band of rainfall moving through the Perth metro area when this cold front actually makes its crossing. It's neck and neck in terms of timing and size and pressure and so forth with the Eastern Weather forecast. However, it looks like it fires up a very good band of thunderstorms as it crosses the Perth coast, and that is something that the Axis G3 often does with these cold fronts, but it's also got me thinking that this cold front here could be especially strong in terms of a band of thunderstorms, which is a little bit unusual at this time of the year, because normally the conditions for thunderstorms embedded in cold fronts do start to deteriorate, and we more get those strong windy winter cold fronts instead of those severe thunderstorms, severe weather June or May cold fronts that we have been seeing. But it's not so much the Axis G3 that's got me really concerned in terms of rainfall here. I mean, that's still about 25 millimetres blowing through very quickly Wednesday night into Thursday morning. If I pull this forecast back a little bit further, take a look what the GFS forecast model has to say. Now, I know it's completely different to what the Axis G3 and the Eastern Bev has to say, but keep in mind that the GFS is typically the most reliable forecast model in the 10-day forecast period. And the reason why I don't use it is just because it's not a powerful forecast model in terms of how much data it has, and I wouldn't be able to crank out the detail that I have in these videos. But when I do get to use it, I love using it. You can see a very strong low pressure system basically engulfing the entire southwest Capes with some damaging winds and some very heavy rainfall here. This is a very strong cold front, sort of a once-a-year type system with some very strong wind gusts. I would also like to say, just to burst your bubble here, very excited for a strong cold front, that this is the first time that it's popped up on the forecast properly, but considering it's got a pressure of 988 millibars over the top of Perth sometime early Friday morning and some very heavy rainfall as well, this is something that's got me very excited on the forecast. A weather event like this, especially for this time of the year, is entirely possible. We're going to watch the forecast very closely over the coming couple of days and just keep an eye on what this cold front does, because it is still, like I said, about a week away. The Bureau of Meteorology is still confident that it is going to be happening. They've got it on their forecasts now, and I'm tracking it very closely. But if this weather event does happen like this, then it will most certainly be the strongest cold front of the year. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be happening, but I do like to bring up weather events like this, very strong weather events that can happen out of the blue, that are on the forecast about 8 or 9 days out in advance, because it gives people the heads up in terms of what weather is actually expected to come through. So for those living in the southwest corner of Western Australia, especially for those living between Geraldton and right down the south coast down towards Perth, just a heads up, it looks like we've got a pretty strong weather system coming our way, and in terms of rainfall, it looks like it's going to drop a pretty good drop here and there as well. Even the Eastern Weather and the Axis G3 staying widespread totals above 30 or 40 millimetres. For Perth, it's going to be more sort of around 25 millimetres, but down towards the southwest coast, it'll be as high as 75 millimetres. And the Axis G3 also calling for some pretty good rainfall as well outside of Perth from that really heavy thunderstorm band. It looks like around 40 or 50 millimetres in pockets up towards 60 millimetres. So yeah, just a heads up, this looks like a pretty strong cold front that's going to be moving through sometime Wednesday or Thursday next week. That's a lot of talk as well. There's been another long forecast update. If I have left anything unanswered, or if you'd like extra detail for your location, then please do ask me in the comment section down below. I'd love to answer all of your questions throughout the course of today. Thank you so much for watching this video to this point. Your support, like I said, has been greatly appreciated, nearing in on 20,000 subscribers. So if you could subscribe, that would be absolutely great as well. Good luck to all of those in New South Wales, I guess, that have this big polar vortex on the way. I know I couldn't deal with the cold, and especially the snow for some of the locations that are not used to snow at all. Yeah, it looks like a really interesting weather event is on the way. But that is all from me today, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.